Hi, it's Mark Bossert, producer of the Pawlik Automotive podcast, and we're here talking cars with Mr. Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. How are you this morning, Bernie?
Doing well.
So today's vehicle is a 2013 Ford E250 van that had a problem with its rear brakes. What was going on with this van?
So the owner of the vehicle came in with the brakes making a pretty bad grinding sound. We did a brake inspection, found that the one brake pad on the rear was extremely badly worn, grinding on the rotor, worn right down to the backing plate.
Okay, that seems a little bit different. What would cause only one pad to wear so fast?
It's basically a seized brake caliper on the right rear, and it's not uncommon. You know, when a caliper seizes, usually often one pad will wear. Where sometimes both pads on one side will wear, but often it'll just be one pad that wears because of the way the caliper seizes. We'll look at some pictures a little later, and I'll explain it further.
Okay, 2013, 5 years old. That's not that old. Did this van have really high mileage?
No, actually not. I mean, in terms of kilometers, it didn't even have 50,000 kilometers. So yeah, a five-year-old van could have a lot, but this vehicle is actually, very low mileage up to this point. So.
And what would cause the caliper to seize this soon in its life cycle?
Yeah, it's kind of a Ford issue. The calipers on these vehicles, on Ford vans and trucks, I find that we replace these more than any other vehicle, and they seem to often seize up at a very early age. I think just due to the design of the calipers, they're just not very durable for some reason. I mean, they're built tough, they're big. We'll look at pictures in a second. I mean, they're tough, they're big, heavy duty, but just something about the design of them, they tend to fail very frequently. And I'd say about 50% of the brake jobs we do on Ford trucks and vans involve replacing calipers. So let's just get into some photos right now. And isn't that lovely? All my pictures seem to have disappeared. So I'll talk for a few more seconds and see if I can get my pictures back. I love it when this happens because this is a good picture show. Ask me a few more questions and I'll stop the screen share. I'll get some pictures back.
Sure. You say this is a fairly common thing to have, and is it just an issue with Fords, or does this kind of caliper freezing or sticking happen on other vehicles?
Actually, it happens on all vehicles, but not quite so often. Like as I say, Ford tends to be, sorry if I'm not looking at the camera here, I'm just trying to download my photos, but Ford, for some reason, in the Ford design, they use what's called a phenolic piston. It's not made of metal, and I think that a lot of the problem is due to that piston design. Let's get these photos up here. But yeah, a lot of it's to do with the piston design. The other thing is that the dust seals on the Fords tend to go bad quite frequently too. And once the dust seal cracks, then water can get in and cause the caliper to seize. So I think I'm ready to do a screen share here. Okay, there's the full picture. So you can see this is the rear brakes completely taken apart. So you have this is the left brake rotor, the left brake pads, the left caliper, and on the right hand side you can see this is the inside of the rotor. You can see very shiny, very gouged, and this is the inboard brake pad completely worn down to the metal backing plate. The outboard pad. You can't see in the angle here, but there's quite a bit more material. We'll look at the pad pictures in a sec. And you can see just a generally rusty condition here, which happens because you got a lot of metal flakes flying through the air. So next picture we'll look at there's a comparison of the brake pad. So this is what the outboard pad looked like. There's about 5 millimeters in that pad and probably at least a few months to a year's life left in that brake pad based on the driving of the vehicle. And there's the inboard pad completely worn. The pad material is completely worn away, just the metal backing plate wearing against that rough rotor. For our next shot, we've got I don't know what, there we go, sharpened up. This is one of the slider pins, and there's a rubber cover over here, and you can see a lot of rust here. So this could have been one of the contributions to the caliper seizing up at an early age. As I say, it is 5 years old. I mean, all it takes is a little bit of road salt to get in here and cause us to seize. Now, being in Vancouver, we don't use a lot of road salt, but we have had a couple winters where there's been a bit of salt on the road. So it may be that the seal isn't very effective at the factory, a bit of bit of, road salt and water got in there and caused this pin to seize. The caliper wasn't completely seized like this. There was movement in this area, but all it takes is a bit less movement and it'll cause the pads to wear quicker. So that combined with piston problems could have caused this issue. There's a picture of the caliper, the right brake caliper. The pistons are sticking a fair amount out. I mentioned the dust seals are a problem. These are the dust seals here. They weren't ripped on this vehicle, but frequently we find that after 50 to 70,000 kilometers, which is kind of an average life for these brake pads, depending on the weight you haul in your vehicle. Of course, these dust seals will often be blown open. And I've seen this for years and years on Fords. They don't seem to have changed a lot over the years. So that's kind of a common problem. I apologize. This photo is not of a sharpest quality that I've done, but this is the old right rear rotor versus the new rotor. As I say, it's a bit of a fuzzy shot, but you can see this surface here, how little material there is there compared to how much metal there is here. So quite a lot is worn off. I don't know how long, this has been noisy. The owner had said he'd had the vehicle in for oil service about a week previously, and they said there's 5 millimeters on his brakes. So they obviously did a quick brake inspection, but that's how much metal is, then all of a sudden started making noise. So that's how much metal is worn off the rotor in 1 or 2 weeks. So you can't go very long like that before it'll completely wear out. Again, another photo of the rotor. You can see how little metal there is here versus how much is on the other side. We have over the years actually seen people wear this completely off, so you have just the fins of the rotor rubbing against the pad, and you can imagine how fast that wears.
That must sound really good.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's horrific. This is the right rear side with the brand new rotor, new pads, and a new. This is a Napa Eclipse caliper. This is a really good quality. These are really good quality calipers. I don't know who else makes a caliper of this quality, but they're. Not only are they painted nicely, but they have better hardware. They take a little more time to rebuild them than the average rebuild. And they're probably about 20% more money than the regular rebuild, but I find they're worth it in terms of quality if a person wants to go for that kind of thing. It's important on a truck. The owner of this vehicle, they haul a lot of weight in it. So we put, the heavy duty fleet pads, ultra premium rotors, and these calipers on, because, you need to do whatever you can to make it last long. If you use cheap pads, they'll wear out fast and they'll just end up costing you more money in the long run. Save you now, but you'll be back having a brake job done sooner. Right? That's the end of our picture show.
So that was a pretty extensive repair then, basically.
Yeah. There was a lot that needed to be done, for sure.
And was it really necessary to replace all the components, or could you have just done the rotors and the pads?
No, there's no way, because the caliper was what caused the pads to seize up in the first place. When you have a wear difference that much, all the other pads are about 5 millimeters, and this other one was 0. It's clearly a seized caliper issue. Although you can have a bad brake hose that'll cause pads to wear too, but in a vehicle of this age, a bad brake hose would be highly unlikely. And as I said, Ford caliper problems are just super common. So yeah, that's kind of the extent. Pads, rotors, calipers, and we also flushed the brake fluid, which had never been done before, and it was old and discolored and dirty. So
maybe talk about that for a second. Why that's a rare kind of thing in my experience in having cars for the last 40 years. Flushing the brake fluid, like, what's that all about?
That's actually one of the more common services we do here. Now, it's one thing that never used to be ever talked about over the years. You and I are kind of the same age. We've had, when we were younger and we had cars, nobody ever flushed brake fluid. But brake fluid is a hygroscopic fluid. It absorbs water, and it's actually meant to do that because if the water actually got stuck in a certain area, say, if it wouldn't absorb water would get trapped in certain areas of the brakes, like it would, maybe down at the calipers or up in the master cylinder, would cause rust and corrosion. So because it actually absorbs water, it actually takes the water with the fluid, but it weakens the fluid quality over time. And what happens is that the boiling point of the fluid goes way down, and the brakes, given enough heat, which happens in braking, usually you'd only ever experience it on long hills, you could actually lose your brakes because the brake fluid would boil. So flushing brake fluid it's been recommended by European manufacturers for many years. They usually recommend it every 2 years. Now, you can look in the manual of a lot of American vehicles, and they won't even recommend it. I don't know why, because it's the same fluid. You're driving in the same conditions. The only place you might be safe from that is if the car never left the Arizona desert. But anywhere else around North America, there's a fair bit of moisture, and that gets absorbed into brake fluid. So the recommendation for a lot of manufacturers is every 2 years. 2 to 3 is good. I mean, we can test the water content, but normally we just look at it visually, and we look, for our regular customers, we just look at their maintenance schedule, and we can tell, if it's been 2 or 3 years, we flush it. So it is actually a fairly common service, but yeah, a lot of people have not heard of it. And in a lot of manufacturers, it's left out, and I don't know why.
All right. Econoline vans have been around forever, basically, almost as long as me. How are they for reliability?
Yeah, they're, I'd say they're fair. I mean, I won't comment on the really old ones because I realize with cars, every decade has its reliability compared to whatever other cars were around in that time. But I'd say that I'd call them fair. I mean, over the years they've had their issues. I mean, I'd say we talked about bad brake calipers. Those are issues that they've had. I mean, generally they're pretty tough, well-built vans, but there's been a few issues with spark plugs blowing out over the years or seizing up. I think Ford's got beyond that in these newer ones. They have like regular type of spark plugs that don't have any issues. Things like intake manifolds have had coolant leaks and things. So, I'd say I'd call them fair, but they've had probably more than their share of problems. But just on a general day-to-day basis, they usually start up fine and run, and they can haul pretty heavy loads. They're usually built quite toughly, if that's the right word to use.
Beefy.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. They're built Ford tough. Interestingly about the Econoline is that actually 2013 is one of the last years. 2014 was actually the last year they made Econolines. They switched to the transit vans, which are those more boxy, cubey type of vans that are kind of mimic sprinters. And it's interesting I've traveled to Europe a couple of times over the last 2-3 years. I noticed, most of the vans they have there are all of that sprinter type design. All the manufacturers have that kind of taller, narrower style van. So it seems like the American manufacturers have all gone that way too, because the Dodges are like that, and the Fords. And it's funny, I don't know what Chevy's been doing, but I should. But the Ford's definitely gone with the transit van, which are those more tall, cubey, rectangular type of vans.
So there you go. If you need service for your Ford vans or truck in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 to book your appointment. You must book ahead. They're busy. Or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. We have hundreds of videos on our YouTube channel at Pawlik Auto Repair. Or we really want to thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're calling from somewhere else in North America, we cannot diagnose your vehicle over the phone. It's not in integrity for us to do that. There's just too many options. So if you're in Vancouver, call us to book an appointment. Otherwise, just enjoy our shows. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for watching.